Well, we do have a full agenda this afternoon, and I'd like to get started again. Our next three presentations will shift our focus towards enforcement of regulations and the law, and the challenges that prosecutors face in bringing strike perpetrators to justice. Kicking off the afternoon is Mr. Les Smith, Manager of the Flight Technologies and Procedures Division within Flight Standards of the FAA. Les will build on the remarks of Administrator Babbitt from this morning and give us more details about the FAA's growing enforcement actions against laser strike perpetrators. Les, thank you for being here today.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Well, welcome back from lunch, everyone. It's always a pleasure to get up and talk about technology and use the right direction. It works well. When it's used the wrong way, it can be a hazard. But it's interesting that I have a conference with ALPA. I had a long flight the other day, so on the way out of the house, I picked up a book from my bookcase so I'd have something to read, and I saw it was like Flying the Line. Well, it had been a number of years since I'd read that and actually forgotten what it was about. When I picked it up, I'm on the airplane looking at it. It's actually the history of ALPA. It was given to me by ALPA when I went to work for an airline many years ago. And for the history of ALPA, I'm not going into that in depth, but just to say that when ALPA was formed, it was formed based on safety, and it's good to see today that they continued on in that tradition, and the focus behind everything they do is safety. And actually, I was reading a book. I still like reading books. I still like to have that paper with me when I'm getting the cockpit or in the back end of the airplane instead of the iPad, because there's that FAA regulation out there that says you have to turn everything electronic off. Well, believe me, that paper still works, and I can still read when we're taxiing for both takeoff and landing. But as I mentioned, if technology is used in the wrong way, then it can certainly be a threat to our profession. And I think it's incumbent upon us and the collaboration of the groups that we have out here, both with ALPA on the safety side, law enforcement, and other regulators and folks in the audience, that probably education for the public is the best way to go forward. Now, if I can get this technology working, here we go. I also would like to thank Patrick for bringing the lasers here today, because the FAA is on a budget cutback and I wasn't able to buy anything to demonstrate when I came up here today. But in any event, we've seen this is a laser, whether that's a laser pointer or one of the ones that was used to light up some of the aircraft, I'm really not sure, but I think it was definitely one of the ones that we used in our simulator years ago. When we put together the video, it was a joint effort between the Air Force and the FAA to show generally what it would look like in the cockpit of the airplane. So the previous slide shows what the source was, and this is what it would look like in the aircraft itself. A little bit of a background. Late in 1995, the FAA received 52 incidents of lasers illuminating aircraft. That was in Las Vegas. We talked about that a little bit earlier today. That's certainly grown over the number of years since then. Typically, it's been temporary visual impairment of the flight crews. And, what do we do to keep moving forward? At the FAA's request, the Federal Drug Administration issued a moratorium ceasing all outdoor laser activities in the Las Vegas area until we could get it resolved. Laser pointers, it's a new dilemma. You have a range up to about 85 miles, 8,000 times brighter than the sun. I didn't see anybody talk about that today, but can cause retinal damage in some instances, and green being 35 times brighter than red. And I actually was happy to see that presentation, because being a business major, I wasn't sure why green was brighter than red until I saw that today. So there are a lot of misconceptions out there on the public side, and that's from the kids, maybe not from some of the local fellows that you saw on the slide this morning, because those that looks like they've been arrested and apprehended, they actually look like they should be where they were at. But it is a misconception that lasers is not a hazard, and that it's not an annoyance. Also, that it's not a hazard against cars. Actually, I'm amazed that we haven't had and maybe the law enforcement agency can talk about this. We've only been addressing airplanes, but I wonder if drivers of cars have had some of the same problems and whether or not they've been reported. So the beam seems to end. Maybe not. Is it thought to hit the aircraft but not the flight crew? We know that that's not true, that it actually is a hindrance to those that are in the cockpit. It can be held by a person at any spot at any time. The exposure is brief. That's probably true. Hits an aircraft as a small dot versus something that is big, and the event is grossly exaggerated. We know that that's not true because it can be a definite threat to the flight crew, specifically at a critical phase of flight. And I know that we, either as a pilot professional, don't want to be up in the front of the airplane when that happens, or a passenger in the back. A lot of unauthorized elimination of events. That's the problem today. Laser incidents. I did have a chart which showed the top 20 airports. It's actually amazing that it's shifted a little bit from the West Coast to the East Coast. It doesn't show it here, but the number of events have picked up over the last few years, with the top 3 laser events now. Airports are both in Phoenix, Philadelphia, and Chicago. And it's grown from something less than 300 back in 2005. And this is kind of a snapshot of what it was back in 2010 and where we are today. It's almost 2795, almost 2,800 events as of today, averaging about 66 per year. So if things go at the pace that they are, we'll exceed what we had in 2010. Some of the summary of the events. Approximately 70% of the laser events are below 10,000, and they occur between 7 o'clock and 11 at night. The fewest events are during May, June, and July, which I find had to scratch my head on that one, but I guess statistically it shows that way. I'm not sure why the folks that are doing it have more time the rest of the year to do it. But I guess they're at the 4th of July parades or something like that during the earlier part. Laser incidents are a global problem. And there's not only just the airline public that's flying, but as we heard today, it's the law enforcement officers as well. And it was definitely a concern with the military when they came to us a couple of years ago to put together a training video so that they could begin to educate their flight crews on some of the problems and how to go about reacting to it when it happens to them. Because even though it's a temporary has a temporary visual impact, depending on the time of the flight, it could be major, and as to whether or not they should be able to continue that flight for a landing or make a missed approach. As far as the government goes, the Department of Commerce is responsible for the production and the import of lasers, but the Food and Drug Administration has a regulatory authority over the laser light shows. And actually, as we also heard today, it appears that they have regulatory authority over the use of them. So it's good to hear that they are coming out with, I guess you call it in drug and FDA, as an NPRM on a proposed regulation against this. In the FAA, what we do is we get involved we receive the reports from the air crews, and then we help assist the local law enforcement agencies in the civil enforcement of these particular individuals. The laws are not uniform across the United States. We have sort of a regulation that we look at from within the FAA on how we can go about enforcing these, but it will be best if there's a regulation in place or a law enforced that the House and the Senate. The chart here, if you go up on laserpointersafety.com, it gives you an indication of some of the problems that they have out there today, and provides an oversight or overview of some of the limited laws that they have per state. And what's interesting is it's not necessarily state laws, but they can actually have different regulations within the counties of these states that can impact the enforcement of laser activities. As far as the Federal Aviation Administrations, it's all based on 14 Part 9111. As the administrator said this morning, we had our legal folks look at that to determine whether or not we still had the authority to use that regulation against lasers, because the law itself was designed and put in place back in earlier years when we had hijackings. But it actually is a very good law in the fact that it covers a lot more than just that. And I think in the part that is important here is the word interfere with a crew member in the performance of the flight. That's what gives us the hook on the Federal Aviation side to go after the individuals on the ground that are causing the problems. Another piece of guidance that's out there, and I saw that it's actually in the packet that was put out today, is the advisory circular that shows how to go about reporting the activity. This is both on the air traffic side and on the air crew side, and it gives you an example of some of the procedures that we go through when we receive a radio call from a report from the air crew to the air traffic facility, whether it's the tower, the air traffic control facility, right on down to our reporting it to the federal agencies. And as you, well, if we're lucky enough to get the law enforcement out there tonight, and that night, and the individual's still out there doing it, then hopefully we could still apprehend that particular person. See, I saw Carlos, if I can find, we have another, okay. We actually have another individual here today, Carlos, who's over the aviation security part of the FAA, that definitely gets more in-depthly involved with the law enforcement actions and the reporting on the air traffic side. So over the years, we realized this was it's a problem, and with the effort of several different organizations and a collaborative effort, both within inside the FAA and industry, put together a laser enforcement working group, which is comprised of, it's like I mentioned, the FAA both on the flight standards, air traffic, and legal part, aeromedical, the Institute, Department of Homeland Security. Key figure is the FBI, CBP, and some of the local ALPA, and in some of the local law enforcement agencies as well. There's an education tool, and I believe this is actually on one of our websites, some of the actions that the flight crews can take if they are hit with a laser light. And it was interesting to hear young first officer today said, don't rub your eyes first thing. Even though the laser might not have hurt him, rubbing the eyes probably did, because he was rubbing them a little bit harder than he should have. So these are just some of the actions that you can take, and I'm not going to go through the list that's totally in depth. Some of the guidance that we put out, laser operations was our advisory circular 7-1 and 7-2. They're actually up on the FAA website. You can look at the links, the outdoor laser events, and some of the Q's and A's for contract information. These are all on the FAA website. I'm not going to read the FAA, the links out verbatim. You can either go to faa.gov, try to look it up, or use 1-800-CALL-GOOGLE. Laser information reports. There are a lot of them we have several on the FAA websites on the hazards in the navigable airspace, the effects of laser illumination, and some of the recent events that we've had. And we do keep a tally of them. But I guess in summary, is from all of the things that we've heard today, you kind of wonder, like, what's the impact of laser illuminations? Is it dangerous? Actually, you bet it is. It's because the flight crews are trying to figure out whether or not it's a weapon. Is it an aircraft position light? Is it a laser pointer? Whatever it is, it's amazing how much they can change and what's available out there on the market. And over the period of lunch, let me see how we're doing on time. We're talking about, should we regulate this more? What should we do? This is technology that's coming up. From a government perspective, it's very difficult to stay ahead with regulations on a lot of the technologies that's out there because it changes so fast. And I think this is a market that, it probably started back when we were, in the classrooms, laser pointers to help out the teachers and everything. And it's incredible what it's grown to and what the kids have taken it to another level. And I mean, there's a lot of uses for the lasers out there from a technology perspective that's very safe, but used the wrong way, it can definitely be a hazard and cause this problem. As I mentioned, we're trying to consolidate them into one website on the FAA. This is the newest website. It's being put together by our Public Affairs Division and Communications. It's an ongoing process that basically started this week. I'm not sure that it's populated today, but if you want to look at it, I'd say keep checking it daily, and hopefully by the end of this week or early next week, it'll be up in full operations. I'd like to thank you very much for your participation. Thank you.